Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another show. Talking about fiends and other things that you may wanna know. I'm headed to Gehenna with some Yugoloths and talking about some sexy foes. So sit here for a minute with It's a Mimic and everybody's favorite host. That's right. Fuck you guys. I'm the best. Hi, everybody. This is Adam, by myself again. Apparently Dan is locking his windows these days, so my days of breaking and entering are over. He wasn't too pleased that all of his liquor went missing, and I believe that he's pretty pissed off at Terry, which is good times. I'm pretty stoked about it. I'm having my own little blood war, which is just fantastic. I figured Dan is lawful evil and Terry's chaotic evil, and I'm just happily sitting here in the middle as neutral evil, which that makes a lot of sense, right? Especially considering that my favorite of all of the fiends are the Yugoloths. They're the least well-known. They are poorly represented, actually, in D&D, but they've got a whole lot of fun flavor and a very unique side to them, so we're going to be focusing on that today. Yugoloths, the number one thing about them is they're all about greed. The thing that they ask more than anything else, it says it right in the monster manual, the number one question from a Yugoloth is, what is in it for me? That's what they want to know. That's what they're into. So here's a little bit of a history before we start breaking down the actual monsters themselves. The very first thing that you should know is that they're from Gehenna. So Gehenna is the plane of existence. It's the lower plane that is neutral evil, and it sits between the lawful, the nine hells, and the chaotic side of the abyss. So the story goes that there were a coven of night hags that were in Gehenna, and they were commissioned by Asmodeus to create a new kind of fiend. So they did. They created the Yugoloths, and they created quite a few of them, and what they did was they ended up writing down their names in what are called the Books of Keeping, which are 4 tomes. And this is important because I don't think I've talked about this yet, but if you know a fiend's true name, not the name it goes by, not what kind of monster it is or its race, but if you know its true name, its real name, then you hold incredible sway and power over it, and it has to do your bidding. So these Books of Keeping have every Yugoloth's name in there except one. And we'll talk about that and who that is in a moment here. But the Night Hags, this coven, they fell to infighting, and the coven disbanded, and the books ended up getting lost over time. And they've been found occasionally by poor mortals that manage to pick them up, and it usually blows up in their faces. But as people have found them over the eons and had control over the Yugoloths, they've also added other names of other fiends in there. So there are devils and demon names in there as well. So they hold sway over absolutely like legions upon legions of fiends. Now, obviously, this doesn't count for creatures like Asmodeus or Demogorgon. I mean, these are godlike creatures, and you reading their name out of a book is not gonna hold sway over them. You're not gonna be able to control them. But it is true for every other one of the kinds of fiends that we find in any of the monster manual or Volos or any of the other books. So let's talk for a moment about the one person that's not in the book, and he's simply known as the General of Gehenna. Now, he's an Ultraloth, and that's the highest level of what a Yugoloth can be. And we'll talk about those at the end of the episode. I think it's the last one, because we go from the lowest CR to the highest. But he is a He's the strongest, so much that nobody actually ever contests his power level. But there are all sorts of Yugoloths that go roaming through the lower planes trying to find him. He steers clear from absolutely all of the battles and the wars and everything, and he runs his own army kind of as a separate warlord off to the side. So he is a thoroughly powerful and evil entity, and he is kind of the absentee leader of the Yugoloths. But for the most part, Yugoloths will follow whoever the highest bidder is. They're mercenaries through and through. They're all about greed, and they make contracts. And most of those contracts have a loophole or something in it to be able to get out of the work should they want to. So they'll be there for the fight as long as it's beneficial to them, but they'll also bail if it stops being beneficial. And that's one of the things that I like about them is they're super, it says right in the monster manual, like the third word in on the Yugoloth entry is the word fickle, which is just absolutely fantastic. I love that these guys are, like, if you control them with the book, they hate it and they become like petulant children. They are completely self-serving, and they're actually kind of suicidal to a degree as well, except on their home plane. They have the same kind of rule that a lot of the other, what used to be called outsiders in previous editions, but what a lot of the Celestials and Devils and Demons have, which is if they end up dying on the prime material plane, they just kind of dissolve and immediately pop back up back in their own home realm. So you can't really kill them. The Yugoloths understand this, and so if they're hired as mercenaries, they will go to war and they will fight to the death, and they'll happily hold a giant barrel of black powder and blow themselves up if it leads to the next thing, because they're getting paid for it. However, if you kill them on Gehenna, they die for real there. Now, what's interesting here, and what makes them different, and this is kind of the last point before we get into the singular breakdowns of what each kind of Yugoloth is, the interesting thing is that there's no rank, there's no promotion from within anywhere within the Yugoloth lore whatsoever. There is for devils, that's key to who a devil is, and it's an option, although a rare one, for demons to be raised from one type of demon to another. But for Yugoloths, it seems like they were created, and this is the form that they get. That's it. They don't get to work their way up through the ranks. And what's also interesting is that there's no way to make more. There's no lost souls or entries through the river Styx or anything. A Yugoloth population, the Yugoloth population, seems to be a finite number. So if they die in Gehenna, there's just fewer Yugoloths forever. Which is kind of interesting because they don't seem to have any way to reproduce or procreate or make more. And that right there to me sounds like an amazing plot hook for an entire 20 level campaign. Anyway, as far as mechanics go, Yugoloths are absolutely full of all sorts of resistances, all the ones that you would expect, like fire, cold, lightning, bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing from non-magical weapons. A lot of them have magical resistance as well, and all of them are immune to poison and acid. Every single one of them also, except one, and we'll get to that in a bit, innately teleports and can just frickin' leave whenever it wants. They all speak both abyssal and infernal, and they have telepathy for 60 feet. So, these guys are really good at bridging the gap between kind of devils and demons. They're going to be able to sit down and be negotiators as well, and they're totally able to deal with mortals. So let's get into each one of them, and we're going to start off actually with Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We're going to start off with CR3. So already with the demons and the devils, they started off with like I think the Devils had a CR0 and the Demons had a CR 1/8. Maybe it was 1/4, but the Yugoloths start off at CR3. So we're coming in at the base level, and these ones are actually unique. They're not even really part of the army. No, I'm talking about the Morenoloth. Now, the Morenoloth is a cloaked Grim Reaper type. These are the boatmen on the River Styx. I spoke quite heavily in the Demon episode and the Devil episode about what the River Styx is and how it functions, and that mortal souls have to pass through it and they get wiped clean. And depending on how evil they are or where they enter the River Styx, they will end up in different areas of the lower planes as either mains or lemures. But so how do people cross the River Styx? They don't have a fly speed. Well, they've got the Morenoloths. They can fight, but they prefer not to. So they would rather be boatmen on the River Styx, ferrying people back and forth for gold. It's usually not a very high price either. But what's really interesting about them is that you can coax them away from the River Styx with a decent enough, attractive enough contract, and they can actually capture and become captains of other ships. They masterfully handle them through any storm. They avoid all natural hazards because they are magically bonded with the ship itself. So it's part of the ship, part of the crew. But they are the only one that actually is bound to the ship, kind of like Davy Jones was in the Pirates of the Caribbean 2, I want to say. It was, Dead Man's Chest. So the thing about them is their ships are their main priority. Any ship that a Morenoloth captains immediately becomes its lair as well, and it has like lair actions. It can heal the ship by 4d10, which is huge. With the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, we just got a whole bunch of naval combat stuff. Imagine a ship that can heal itself. It can also increase the ship's speed by 30 feet for one round, but it can do this over and over and over again, right? So these ships are going to be incredibly fast. And it can also fill the ship itself with strong winds, which will act as difficult terrain within the ship itself. It also imbues its ship with one of the following regional effects as well. Either A, the ship does not sink, even if it takes damage and the hull is breached, it won't sink. The next one, B, the ship always stays on course, no matter what. Whatever the destination is that the Morenoloth wanted to go to in the first place, that's where the ship will hit. And then the final thing is that creatures aboard it can ignore the wind and weather effects. But the Morenoloth can choose which creatures can ignore these wind and weather effects. And the creatures will still take damage. They just won't get slowed down or blown overboard or anything like that. So there's kind of a semi-force field that they can put around people. Now, they're also innate spellcasters, but they get spells like environmental spells. Control water, gust of wind. I think control weather is one of them as well. So these are... that's what you would expect from something that is inherently built into being a ship captain, right? So the big mechanic that I like with it is that it has a fear gaze as well that can cause a frightened condition. So this feels like it's a bit of a tyrannical ship captain that's singly focused on its job and its mission and keeping its ship sailing and kind of on course and on track. So the Morenoloth is a lot of fun because we don't really have anything like that in any other sort of fiendish lore at all. So I really like them for the River Styx, and the idea that these are like Grim Reapers that are the guardians of the lower planes is just a great way to get started if your party is heading into the lower planes. The next entry on the list is the Metzoloth. Now, the Metzoloth are pretty famous. They are, I would say one of the more recognizable C-tier monsters that you've probably seen art for these guys. They're human-sized insectoids, much like fiendish, four-armed cockroaches. They prefer to use a trident, so you often see them holding the tridents, even though they've got these four, like, pincher claws as well. Now, they make up the majority of the Yugoloth populations. I would say that maybe even 2 or hell, even 3 of the books of keeping are just full of Metzaloth names. There are so many of these compared to the other Yugoloths, and they act as the foot soldiers. They're the ones that you're going to run into. They're the most common by far. The cool thing about them is that they've got this lore that says that if they get surrounded by enemies, they will exhale toxic fumes and try to escape. But then when you sit there and you look at their actual mechanics and you go looking for this breath weapon, it doesn't exist. And it takes a second to realize that what they're doing is they're just casting cloud kill. So, again, every one of these Yugoloths are an innate spellcaster in one way or another. It's odd to me that that the lore and the mechanics don't quite line up the way that we expect them to, but that's, I find, very true of everything in 5th edition as well. Where it's almost like there was a conversation and a description. Ooh. Sorry, Terry. I think I broke a coffee table. Anyway, there's a conversation and a... Shit, that's not going to come out either. He's going to be pissed. Hold on. Hold on. Dan was here. There we go. Fix that problem. So, I'm going to have my own little blood war, and I'm so excited about it. Anyway, Metzaloths are... they're incredibly interesting creatures because they are going to be the ones that are just the base level Yugoloths that are all about the greed and the mercenary lifestyle. And this is going to be, at CR5, that's a good introduction to who Yugoloths are. One of these guys can be a pretty decent boss monster for a tier 1 party. But then by the time you hit tier 3, you can see 6 or 7 of these guys and, with a couple of decent fireballs and some strategic gameplay, you can wipe out these guys by the dozen. So I really enjoy Metzaloths for what they bring to the table. But they're not as much fun as the freaking weird Yugoloth. Now, this is back from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Now, this is not to be confused with the Dragloth, which I talked about in the Demon episode. That was the four-armed creature where the Glabrazu and the Drow High Priestess made an offspring. No, we're talking about the Yugoloth. These things are... You're not going to get them mistaken if you see the two of them in the same room. These guys are green. They have 5 clawed arms, 3 legs, squat like barrel-like bodies, and they've got insect heads. They look almost like green ants' heads. They are considered dumb brutes, and they either don't understand or refuse to follow complex commands. They're vicious, they're destructive, and they revel in their butchery. And you can actually often hear them laughing as they murder their victims on the battlefield. They will out-berserk a barbarian, even a berserker barbarian. These things are going to go toe-to-toe with them. And at CR7, they got a good chance of wiping out even your average barbarian. They've got multi-attack. It's weird the multi-attack only has 2 claws. But I'm willing to forgive that based on their special ability. Again, we've got some spellcasting abilities innately. Darkness, fear, sleep, to be exact. But what's really fun with them is that they have a recharging Whirlwind Attack that can hit any adjacent creatures as long as these guys move past 5 feet, at least 5 feet of their 30 feet of movement. So any adjacent creatures. Now, this is with their claw attacks, but the thing that's crazy about it is that if the battlefield lines up perfectly and they have just an open corridor with enemies, like on both sides of this open 30-foot long, 5-foot wide stretch, they can hit up to 20 freaking creatures with these claw attacks in a single turn. And this recharges. So this thing is just massive. It can do some crazy damage. I would love to walk one of these things through an army of NPCs just to prove a freaking point to a party. That's a lot of fun. Next on the list is the Yugoloths. The Yugoloths are weird. Again, you may have seen these. I often see them listed amongst art of Fiends, mixed in and amongst the devils and the demons. So they're pretty popular. They're from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. They're CR8. They're red armored quadrupeds. Like, imagine though that their neck is nearly as thick as their torso, and instead of a head, they just have a gaping maw of teeth at the end of their neck, with a 30-foot long barbed tongue. I hope I described that well, because these things kind of defy description. So instead of where you think their head would be, is this giant mouth full of razor sharp teeth, and a long spiked 30-foot long tongue comes flying out of there. Now these guys prefer guard work, and they're really built for it. They also never do any more or any less than exactly what they were asked, period. So these are not going to be, they're almost just freaking guard dogs. They're not going to be having conversations. They're not going to have goodwill or loyalty. They are just going to do whatever they have been asked to do in their contract. They've got great passive perception. They've got 120-foot true sight, so your invisibility isn't going to help you there. And they've got this ability which radiates 60 feet of this anti-magic field almost that just negates teleportation attempts, either in or out. Additionally, it can't be surprised. So these are really the perfect guard animals. These are the only Yugoloths that cannot teleport. Now, the crazy thing about the tongue attack, which, man, I'm sure that Terry would just be giggling if he heard me say those two words. So the thing with the tongue attack is, if it hits, the target is grappled and restrained and immediately pulled to 30 feet towards the Yugoloth. But that's it. That's where it holds the enemy. So it does a base amount of damage, but not a whole bunch. It prefers to just hold them and not kill them unless they've been specifically told to kill any trespassers or intruders. So these guys would be great to put up against even a tier 1 party. They're going to be able to hit. They're going to be scary. You're not going to be able to do much damage. They're going to know that you're there, and they're going to capture you until the boss comes, or whoever it is that they signed a contract with shows up. If you have trouble coming up with a way to actually capture a party, because you know that they're just going to try to take on the 40 knights, and they're going to get, cut down, a Yugoloth is a really fun way of using a monster to capture and not kill. And there's very few of those in Dungeons & Dragons, especially in 5th edition. Next on the list, we have the Hydroloth. Hydroloth is a CR9. This one's from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes as well. Man, we have another frog monster. The Hydroloth, it feels like it's going to get lost in the shuffle at first glance. Between Bullywugs, Hezru, Slod, Banderhobbs, Froghemus. 5th Ed, Dungeons & Dragons just seems to have a weird obsession with the concept of frog monsters. And this just seems to be another one of them. The thing that stands apart with these guys is that they steal thoughts, and they will deliver these thoughts to their masters. So yes, they're amphibious. Yes, they're well suited to coastal and underwater combat, but they've got lots of mind warping spells. They have advantage on attacks if they're submerged underwater, which is neat, but their big thing that they have is called Steal Memory. This is their ability. This is their unique, mechanical, nasty feature that they have. It does some pretty solid psychic damage. And on a DC 16 intelligence save, so, the dump stat for nearly everyone, DC 16, the target, if they don't make it, will lose all their proficiencies. They will not be able to cast spells. They will not be able to understand language. Their intelligence and charisma drop to 5. That's crippling. If this works on 2 or 3 different creatures, you can just cripple a party completely. Now, the thing is that in 5th edition, you can always, save at the end of your next turn. You can try to roll your save again. Not for this effect. You can try to save again after a long rest, which means this is going to incapacitate you for a minimum of 8 hours, and then you have to make the DC 16 intelligence save with an intelligence of 5, which means you have a negative modifier on that. This could cripple your party for literally days. I love the idea of Hydroloths hitting coastal towns and raiding areas and whatnot. And people sit there and they go, I don't remember why. I don't know why this happened. And then they go back to whoever their master is and they say, okay, look, here's the deal. There's this population. Here's where the bank vault is. City hall is this. This is the guard rotation, because they've stolen these memories. And everybody left in town is lost and confused. What a strange and interesting setup with a CR9 monster. So you can be dropping this for a tier 2 and tier 3 party, and it's going to be pretty effective. Even tier 4, if you drop 5 or 6 of these things in there, that's going to be an imbalanced combat. But, well, by the time that you're level 20, you should be blowing up more than your average frog monster. CR9 as well also has, from the monster manual, the Yugoloth. These guys are large-sized. They're muscular, green, winged, and horned. They look like gargoyles, essentially. They tend to wield a giant axe or a large sword. They're the most loyal of the Yugoloths, but only if they're treated well. If you treat them well, they will follow you, and they will go above and beyond what their contract says. These guys are innate spellcasters as well. They can detect and dispel magic. They also have the ability to go invisible. They've got powerful melee attacks, and its claws do persistent, worsening, slashing damage until healed. So when you get hit by one of these claw attacks, you take the damage. On the next round, you take the damage again. On the round after that, you take even more damage from this wound that is just opening and opening. And you are bleeding out, and you need to get healed from this thing. I would say, as a DM myself, I would rule it that if this wound is not healed, when you're in death saves, that's an auto fail. It's the same thing as getting hit by someone while you're unconscious, right? So, these guys can be pretty powerful and pretty nasty, and they can live up to their CR9, especially if the party doesn't have a healer. We jump up to CR11 now with the Yugoloth. The Yugoloth, again, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. These guys are interesting. They got a lot of fun flavor to them. They're the skilled negotiators of the Yugoloths. They're mostly naked fiends. They've got like a loincloth with a book over their genitals, and they wear a cape. They've got reddish skin that looks, almost humanoid and normal. Like they're large creatures, but they have small horns on their head, and they've got large clawed feet, but they've got bat wings for ears. The cape that they have is draped over one arm, and it reveals a human-sized arm, which on a large-sized body seems relatively small. But this is the arm that it uses to draft all of the Yugoloth contracts. If you're going to make a contract with any Yugoloth, it's probably going to be a Yugoloth. They are the base contract maker, and they will actually work for more powerful Arcanoloths. When the Yugoloth, however, needs to use force, it shifts its cape to the other side, revealing a huge muscular arm with 15-foot reach that it can use to attack. These guys command lesser Yugoloths, and they usually work for Arcanoloths and Ultraloths. I mean, they follow the contract to their letter, but these are the guys that work in the loopholes that allow them and other Yugoloths to ignore the obligations if they want. They've got some pretty good saves. They're innate spellcasters. They have cool lightning attacks, which we don't see a whole lot of down in the lower planes, so that's kind of fun too. That'll catch your party off guard. Their small arm has an electrified touch that deals a whopping 68 lightning damage. Not 68, 6d8 lightning damage. And the massive arm has that 15-foot reach I mentioned. It does major damage and can stun enemies. If a creature is stunned this way, the Yugoloth can then steal 7d8 plus 4 hit points from the creature. It heals half of that itself. So 7d8, so that's up to 56 plus 4, so up to 60. It can do 60 damage at max damage. It can heal itself for half that amount, and it forces a Constitution save. And on a failure of that save, that damage that they do is also done to the maximum hit points of the creature that it hits. So this arm attack just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Additionally, it can use its recharging ability that it has to allow 2 nearby allied Yugoloths to make melee attacks as reactions. So instead of, like, this is an action to trigger this, but instead of attacking, maybe it has a couple of bodyguards with it. That totally makes sense, right? So, and it inspires the bodyguards to get just free attacks as reactions. But the craziest part about this whole thing is that the frickin' Yugoloth can use its teleport ability as part of its multi-attack. So it can hit and leave, or it can show up and hit. That's crazy. So this thing has got some real potential on a battlefield, and you're going to be able to mess up a party. I feel like death spirals are, they're on the table with one of these guys, especially if you hit a high tier 2 party. Arcanoloths are probably my favorite of the Yugoloths, just because they're the first mini I ever pulled out of a pack, and I'm like, what the hell is this? It's a medium-sized CR12 creature from the Monster Manual. You've probably seen the art for it, and a lot of people actually think of Arcanoloths when they think of Yugoloths in general. They're shape-shifting spies and diplomats with immaculate grooming. Their natural form is an anthropomorphic jackal in fine robes. They're powerful spellcasters. They're highly intelligent. They're greedy for information and power and magic items. They do command Yugoloth armies occasionally, but it's all about the intelligence for them. They're hoarding information. And they really do like to transform into other creatures and masquerade as anything besides their jackal form. So you don't always know you're dealing with an Arcanoloth at first. Additionally, they speak all known languages. They have great saving throws. Their claw attacks do poison damage. And they've got a whole lot of powerful spells, up to and including the level 8 spell Mind Blank. Arcanoloths are going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. And if you've got even a remotely strategic dungeon master using them, with a couple of other Yugoloths nearby, see, the Yugoloths all come in packs. They're always working together. They're always part of an army. So this may be a CR12 creature, but he's got 5 or 6 bodyguards, and you've got a CR 18 or 19 or 20 even encounter here. So Arcanoloths and Yugoloths in general can be very, very dangerous, even to high tier 4. Next on the list is the Oinoloth. The Oinoloth is also a CR12. It's the last one from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. These guys are gross. They're a lot of fun, but in all the wrong ways. They're clad in rags, and they're covered in boils. They're diseased, purple-skinned creatures with ram heads and long fingernails. They're purveyors of pestilence and disease. I mean, that's the name of the game with these guys. They're all about disease. They're really the last resort. as they spread disease to everyone on each side of the battle. So, I mean, they're not the first one that a demon or a devil or even a mortal is going to try to make a deal with. They're going to be kept kind of in the back, waiting in the wings, because these guys will walk through battlefields. They'll poison everybody around them, both sides, and even the ground and plant life nearby. For a very steep price, they can also cure diseases, but the afflicted creature will never fully recover. These guys are innate. They're not inane. They're innate spellcasters. They've got powerful spells. Their claws do massive necrotic damage. They have a transfixing gaze as part of the multi-attack. And their gaze charms and restrains its victims, which means that they're going to do whatever they're told, but they can't move. It also has 2 different recharging abilities, and it gets a little out of control here pretty quickly. The first one is called Bringer of Plagues. This recharges on a 5 or a 6 as a bonus action as well, so even scarier. The Bringer of Plagues ability blights a 30-foot radius, not diameter here, for 24 hours. All plants wither and die, and any healing to a creature that is caught in this area is halved. Additionally, when a creature enters at the start of its turn in the area, it has to make a con save or take 4d6 necrotic damage and be poisoned. This poison means the creature cannot regain hit points. So, before I go any further, anybody that heals in this area only gets half the healing that they normally would. If they fail their con save, they take 4d6 necrotic damage, and they are not able to regain hit points. After 24 hours, so not a long rest, but 24 hours specifically, then this creature can try the save again. But if they fail again, their max hit points are reduced by 1d10. If this reduces a creature to 0 hit points, it dies. And here's the thing about it. You still cannot heal, and you need 3 successful saves against the poison in order to end it. Which means you can be poisoned for days, not able to heal. And you've already taken some damage, and your max hit points are dropping as well. And it still has another recharging attack called Corrupted Healing. This recharges on a 6. And it allows the Yugoloth to touch a willing creature and restore all of its hit points immediately. And it'll even remove 1 disease or a condition. Specifically, I think it's the blinded condition, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned. But there's a cost. And the cost is that creature takes a level of exhaustion and has its max hit points reduced by 2d6. This cannot be undone with a wish spell, or with anything except a wish spell or greater restoration being cast on the target 3 times within an hour. So you've got to have some high-powered spellcasters there. And again, if your max hit points reach 0, you die. So 3 times within an hour for greater restoration or a wish. This thing is all about draining your max hit points over and over and over again. And it's devious. So it'll sit there and it will infect people on the battlefield, and your heroes are going to start dropping, and they'll realize that, wait a minute, oh shit, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. And maybe the Yugoloth gets away, and then it shows up and it says, look, I can heal you. You only have 4 hit points left. You failed your save 3 times, and you're on death's door. No one else can heal you, but I can. But I will remove the disease, and I will restore all of your hit points, but you take a level of exhaustion, and before that restoration hits, your max hit points are reduced by 2d6. That's scary. So this thing is kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of creature, and I absolutely love it. There's nothing like this in the Monster Manual. Mordenkainen's really stepped up, especially with the Yugoloths and the other Fiends. The final one that we have to talk about is the Ultraloth. Ultraloths are humanoids that look like stereotypical aliens with green skin, long heads. They've got golden eyes. These are the freaking X-Files aliens, right? They're the gray alien autopsy, but kind of beefier. They've got some muscles to them. This is what the General of Gehenna is. He's a super version of an Ultraloth. They don't have any other facial features. So they just have these like green skin with these long ovoid heads and these golden eyes. Their eyes can actually memorize creatures and leave them helpless. They're commanders of the Yugoloth armies, but they act more like mob bosses than generals. They're always scheming for more power. They hate everything, including each other, and they're openly hostile toward one another. They, as a matter of fact, also won't even fight in the armies. They will stand off to the side and allow the lesser Yugoloths to fight in the armies, but the other Yugoloths are completely fine with that. They will all listen and obey them, and because they know their place in their ranks, largely due to the Ultraloth's infamous reputation for cruelty. But this is the most powerful Yugoloth at CR13. So, this leads me to believe that you're not going to run into a single Yugoloth out on the battlefield. You're going to run into a Ultraloth surrounded by Metzaloths or an Arcanoloth or two working together, with an Oinoloth standing off at the side waiting to be unleashed to spread disease and pestilence. That's what we're dealing with here. Yugoloths should come in hordes. They should have contracts. They should have loopholes. They should be greedy and cruel, and they should be devious. All of them should be devious to some degree or another, except maybe the Durgaloths, which just those are the insect ones with the 5 arms and the Whirlwind Attack. I absolutely love Yugoloths, and they really need to be used more. Even if you are just going to have a regular kind of blood war campaign or you're going up against demons, take the opportunity to grab a couple of the weirder Yugoloths, bring them in, and give a glimpse of the larger scale of the blood war to your players. And remember, I don't think that I've said this, but it's really useful. Your players can hire Yugoloths if they want. If they have the means to, Yugoloths will totally, 100% side with them. For a fee, usually with a catch, and they will do the bidding in the most brutal, negative, destructive way that they possibly can, because these things are just pure evil. They don't give a shit about law. They don't give a shit about corruption and destruction. They just are out for themselves. And if you're in the way, you're fucked. Which, speaking of in the way, I need to get out of here before Terry comes home. So, and it is, oh God, almost 3 a.m. now. Terry, buddy, where are you? Man, I should just go hide in the cafe across the street, make sure he gets home okay. I'm a little worried about the poor little guy. I'll let you know what's going on. I'm also going to go leave a bunch of boot prints around. I have Dan's boots with me, so his work boots. So I'm going to leave a couple drywall prints here. I'm hoping that I can have these two guys at each other's throats by the time that we get to the proper Fiend episode. So, I will be talking to you tomorrow with our last section on Fiends.